As it turns out, not bad, but also not great for long term. Welcome to Watching the Horizon. I'm Jake, not coffee. I want to talk to you today about water storage, a necessity of life, one of the primary things that all preppers should have in their cache. The basics, food and water. Without water, prepping for the rest really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, obviously, depending on where you are, will determine how you prep for water. Depending on where you live. If you're out in the country, maybe you have a well, maybe you do rain catchment, and that totally counts. You're good in most instances. But if if you rely 100% on, water coming in from your tap, then you may want to consider putting aside some water for your water storage. Now, I could get into all the reasons why water storage is so important. I could go on and discuss all manner of scenario as to how water has the ability to break down. Water plants, stop producing, or there's an issue with the pipes, or some sort of disaster will cause water to not be available. This is sort of topical for the moment. If you're watching this video later, it'd be interesting to see, to look back. But right now in the news, the Mexican government is turning off the water for Mexico City, which is a pretty big place, by the way. They're turning it off. I think they said it's going to take 4 days. And 4 days without water for all those millions of people that live in Mexico City. So it happens. All right, let's get to it. Water storage. This is more of a how-to video. I would like to know in the comments. Please tell me, for those of you who do water storage, what do you do? I would really like to hear some real world answers from other preppers out there. Let me tell you a little bit about my experience and how that went down. I owned a home. If you follow my channel, you kind of know a little bit about my story. I owned a home. I had an IBC tote, had a lot of water in there. When I decided that I was gonna, get out of the city, I started renting. Having water storage as a renter is very difficult because water is very heavy. It takes up a lot of space. So, how does one overcome that? Now, obviously, if you own your property, if you own your home, having a little bit more of a permanent setup, seems to make a lot more sense. Some of the homes still have cisterns in them from back in the day, but as a renter, what do you do? And it was still really important to me to have all of those things. The first thing that I tried was milk jugs. I had a bunch of milk jugs, washed them out real good, cleaned them, dried them. It was fine. Filled them up with water. I had about a dozen of them, and I kept them in a cool, dry place. It was actually on some carpet. It wasn't directly on any kind of concrete or anything like that, because that plastic's kind of thin. But I figure, it does, how thick does it really need to be, right? Well, turns out, for those of you who are kind of already laughing and shaking your heads, thank you. Yeah, milk jugs, not the best container for storing water, at least for any length of time. That plastic will become very brittle and it will crack. And all the water that are in those milk jugs will just drain and leak everywhere. And then depending on where you store it, you may have a mold problem. It doesn't necessarily come out all at once, but the plastic will crack and then you will end up with a very consistent drip. And then if you have a dozen of those going, it doesn't work. Don't use milk jugs. So I'm like, well, what do you do? And I didn't really want to fiddle with it. I didn't want to mess with it. I just wanted the solution, and I just wanted to get it in place so I had it so I could stop worrying about it. I started looking at some alternatives. I was, considering doing the blue barrels, but as a renter, that's difficult. So I thought maybe the smaller ones, like the 30 gallon or maybe just a series of 5 gallon. Those containers are kind of expensive. So what I ended up doing was I just bought water bottles. I went down to Sam's Club and I filled up one of those flat carts, and I must have had, oh, I don't know. I tried to do the breakdown, and for my family, I had 3 months worth of water. That was a lot of water, but I felt good about it because at least each case of water was, movable. Kind of like this guy. That's you can pick them up by the plastic. You could just move them, transport them. Yes, they were heavy, but it was doable. So that was my solution. That's what I did. Water bottles, as it turns out, not bad, but also not great for long term. And when I say long term, I mean anything over a year. Hard to believe, but the plastic that water bottles come in are porous. Here's a typical water bottle right here. What happens is this plastic, yeah, you can worry about BPH and all that other stuff, and maybe even these newer plastics don't have it. Remember, water's a solvent? Yeah, even over time, the plastic does start to dissolve, but that's not even really the thing that I'm worried about. That's not the problem. The problem is it's porous, and it will evaporate through the plastic over a long enough time period. And I know this because if you ever have a water bottle, I mean, look at that. I don't know if you can see that. It's not open. I never opened this, but you'll see that's maybe 30% of that water has evaporated through, and since it's going through the plastic, it creates a vacuum, so it just ends up shrinking. So, and then they start falling out of the plastic cases that they're in because they don't take up the same amount of space. You lose water to time. That's only after a year. I don't know. What is that? That's at least 30%, maybe more. I mean, it's better than nothing. I did crack some of these open just to see, and I tasted it, and they taste awful. They absolutely taste disgusting. Better than nothing, right? But the really heavy plastic taste. I have no idea, if that's going to do anything to your kidneys or your liver or anything like that. But I mean, it can't be good for you. But, in a pinch, water's water, right? It's whatever plastic got dissolved into the water, whatever. When you're thirsty, you're thirsty. So not a great long-term solution either. Maybe for a renter who does find themselves, moving every few years, maybe because of your job or your circumstance. But if it looks like that's going to be you, water bottles might be the only way to go. Or if you were to get some other solution like a 55-gallon, blue drum or something like that, or even the 30 gallons, you just drain them every time you have to move, and then you refill them up, wherever you go, rather than, move the water. Anyway, don't use milk jugs. Just know that if you get the water bottles, rotate them out. You can't just stick them away in your long-term storage and forget about them. My problem is that we did rotate through them, but because I bought so much water, I mean, we don't use, water bottles on a intense daily basis or anything like that. So I was anticipating when making that purchase, it was going to be our sole water source. And I wanted to make sure, we had enough water for, a good length of time. But even just through normal use, it wasn't enough to get through it. I mean, I had water bottles that were a couple of years old, and they were more than that. They were thinner than that, and I just ended up throwing them away. I mean, they were kind of useless at that point. It's just, flimsy plastic. And they tasted really bad. I think that for long-term water storage, if you just want to put it away and then never have to worry about it again, never have to think about it, just, get it into your preps and then, set it and forget it kind of deal. You don't really have a lot of options. I can only think of one, and I would really like to hear what some of your suggestions are. And this is excluding rain catchment and well water. I'm talking about stored water. The 55-gallon blue drums is good. But even that plastic, it's not a perfect seal. Even the ones that are, got the watertight and all that stuff, it's still, you're still gonna lose through evaporation or seepage. But that's okay. You got to top them off. It's not like these things don't have maintenance requirements. If you've got 55-gallon drums of water and that's your water storage, that's good. But you can't just think that you fill them up and then that's it. If you really truly want a set it and forget it solution, the only one that I can think of, and I'd love to hear your suggestions and comments, the only one I can think of is water in a can, like a soda can. You can buy water in aluminum cans, just like, beer or soda. I'm pretty sure that's the only one I can think of. The problem is that's probably one of your more expensive solutions. Yeah, you can have crates and crates of canned water, but super expensive. I mean, even if you were to jar the water, I mean that's glass jars with the canning lids, you can do that. But I mean, there's so much expense in the actual jars and equipment that it doesn't seem reasonable, at least not for water. Again, I welcome your thoughts. For those who just want a set it and forget it solution, I think canned water in aluminum cans is the only one that I can think of. But have more than one water source. Don't just rely on a single, water source. If you have, water in water bottles, if you recycle like the 2-liter bottles that soda comes in, those are good. It's a thicker plastic. Evaporation is slower. You're gonna have a twinge of flavor of whatever was in that bottle before. I don't care how much you clean it. But, I mean, when you're thirsty, you're thirsty. So do what you can do. Like I said, I'd love to hear your comments. So there you go. Water storage. If you've got a permanent solution, fabulous. Always have backups. Always have at least, even if you don't use it, have supplies for rain catchment. Have supplies for water filtration. We've got a bunch of Berkey filters in backup. We have a Berkey filter in the home that all of our water that we drink goes through. Because the water's already processed, those filters, they last a really long time because generally the water's already clean. We've got a couple backup filters that we don't use. We just keep them in storage. That way, if we need to use alternative water sources, either from outside, a creek or stream, the river, the lake, whatever, at least we've got some filters that'll keep us going. So have more than one solution for your water because of how important it is. You don't ever want to be stuck with just one. Like if all I had was milk jugs full of water and that was my solution, and I'm like, nope, it's good, I put it on the shelf, it's fine, and then something were to happen, not even long term, let's just say something happened a couple months later, guess what? I'm out of water. That was my solution. I'm out of water because what I didn't know is the jugs wouldn't hold up to time. They cracked, all the water's gone. You have to plan, for the unexpected, for the failure. So have backup systems. All right, I've rambled long enough. Again, put your thoughts down. I want to know what you guys have set up for your water solutions, and be sure to keep your eyes open.